Good evening, this is Mr. Wintermelon, and we have come a long way from cells, how substance move in and cells, and we also learned about the substance that move in and out, which is your nutrients and your waste. What are the nutrients in biological molecules, as well as enzymes that catalyze reaction inside our body as well as our cells. So in next part of our O-level biology syllabus, we are going to learn how does the cell obtain all the nutrients, how does the whole human consume the food, and how does the nutrients in the food gets to our cell. And we start off by nutrition in human. The part of digestion is what we are going to focus on in this video. So let us take a look at the learning objective. So you are supposed to describe the main function of the alimentary canal and the associated organs. I have color-coded them into alimentary canal organs as well as associated organs, which are in blue. Then you are going to learn peristalsis, which is how all the food get propelled down or through the alimentary canal. And finally, the enzyme involved in digestion. So it is a good practice to always refer to the learning objective. I will start off the lesson by asking, is nutrition in human a journey to the anus? Or is it a journey to the cells? So think about it. The food that we eat, the nutrients that we obtain, does it goes into our body? Or actually all of you should be aware there are something that come out from our anus. So what are the substances that come out from our anus? Are those poop digested material? So let us get to the bottom of this. So in human nutrition, there are actually 4 stages plus one that they include, which is the passing out of food or undigested food. So nutrition is a process which organisms obtain food and energy for growth and repair and maintenance of body. And the stages are ingestion, whereby human take in food, basically is a fancy way of saying eating. Digestion, which is what we are concerned about in this video, and you might want to copy this down. Digestion is a breaking down of large, complex, insoluble food substances to smaller, simpler, soluble, diffusible molecules. So your body cannot absorb the whole fried chicken. It must be digested into soluble molecules before our body can absorb them for them to be incorporated as part of our body. So there's a saying, you are what you eat. In the next video, we will learn about absorption, which is the movement of digested food into the bloodstream or lacteal before they are taken in by cells. And lastly, assimilation, the conversion of absorbed food into the protoplasm, which is a fancy way of saying part of the cell, as well as the use of absorbed food to provide energy. And the last stage, in digestion, the food or the undigested food doesn't get assimilated into our body, so it's not really nutrition, if you ask me. So let us get started by the different forms of digestion. So digestion can occur in 2 ways. First is by mechanical digestion. You might want to copy this down, which is the physical breakdown of food into smaller pieces without any chemical change to the molecules of the food. So you can imagine a big piece of Kentucky Fried Chicken, you bite it or you chew it into smaller pieces of Kentucky Fried Chicken. essentially, at the end of the day, they are still muscle fiber of a chicken, just that it is smaller pieces. Then we have our all-important chemical digestion, which is the breakdown of large food molecules into smaller food molecules. This is a chemical reaction involving specific enzyme in our body, and this will make the nutrient soluble so that our body can absorb them. In mechanical digestion, a big chunk of food is being broken down into smaller pieces, and this will allow a greater surface area for the enzyme to work on, so that the chemical digestion can occur at a faster rate. So chemical digestion is the breaking down of larger food molecules into soluble food molecules, and this involves enzyme. An example is shown here. So an enzyme that breaks down starch is called amylase, and the enzyme will remain chemically unchanged. So this is a callback to what we have learned in our previous chapter. So there are three types of enzyme that you should be aware of. There's the carbohydrates, protease, as well as lipase. So carbohydrates will break down the carbohydrate, protease the protein, and lipase will break down the lipids or the fats. So the food begins its journey through our mouth. After going through our mouth, it will enter the oral cavity or the buccal cavity. Buccal cavity is just a fancy way of saying inside our mouth. Is it important? Not really. But what you do have to know is the pH inside the mouth or the buccal cavity is 7. This is important. So inside our mouth, there's the most muscular external muscle, which is our tongue, together with our teeth, as well as 3 pairs of salivary gland. So right now, salivary gland, the word gland is a new word to you. So what is gland? So glands are specialized tissue or an organ that secrete chemical substance. They can secrete substance into our bloodstream or outside of our body. In this case, they are secreting saliva as well as the enzyme inside our saliva into our mouth. So please copy down the definition of gland. It will be useful as we carry on. Now you might be wondering, our saliva is not secreted inside our bloodstream, right? Neither is it secreted outside of our body because it's secreted inside our mouth. There's a distinction between gland that is secreting chemical into the bloodstream as well as outside of our body. And why is secreting saliva into our mouth outside our body? Let us take a look at this donut. So our alimentary canal is a glorified, longer tube version of a donut. So imagine a donut, but it is being stretched out to a few meters long. For glands that secrete chemical into our bloodstream, it is something like secreting chemical throughout the part of the donut which you can consume. So those glands are called endocrine glands. We are not going to touch on it in this chapter, but basically endocrine glands secrete chemicals into our bloodstream. As for the digestive enzyme gland that we are concerned about in this chapter, they secrete enzyme outside. Now, you might be thinking, our stomach is inside our body, it's not really outside, right? Now, this is where you are wrong, because the outside of the donut, there's actually two outside. This outside, whereby it's on the exterior surface, as well as the outside on the interior. So for the gland that secrete our digestive enzyme into the interior, we call them the exocrine gland. So they secrete the enzyme outside of our body in this manner. So inside our mouth, our teeth will grind the food into smaller pieces. This is a form of mechanical digestion. Our salivary gland will secrete saliva, and inside our saliva, it contains salivary amylase, and this amylase will convert starch into the disaccharide we have learned before called maltose. Our tongue will roll the food into a bolus for us to swallow. After swallowing, our food will travel into the esophagus, which is a long and muscular tube, consists of circular and longitudinal muscle. Now, please take note, it is not just the esophagus that contains circular and longitudinal muscle. The rest of our alimentary canal also consists of these two sets of muscle. If not, we would not be able to push the food to our anus. These two muscles, circular muscle as well as longitudinal muscle, they are antagonistic muscle. That means when one contracts, the other one will relax. When one relaxes, the other one will contract. So antagonists, they do the opposite of what each other is doing. Something like the villain will do the opposite of the protagonist. So how do they go about doing their job is a process known as peristalsis. So peristalsis is the rhythmic wave-like contraction as well as relaxation of muscle in the wall of alimentary canal. That means it is not just in esophagus, it is happening throughout, in our stomach, in our small intestine, large intestine, to mix and propel the content of the alimentary canal. That means the half-eaten food or the partially digested food. And how does peristalsis look like? It looks something like this. So what I have down here is a tube. You can imagine that this is your esophagus or just about any part of your alimentary canal. Then I also have a battery down here which symbolizes your food, because just like food, battery actually give you energy. So let us put our food inside our esophagus and see how the contraction and relaxation works. So the esophagus will contract, which will push the battery forward. Contract, push the battery forward, contract, and push the battery forward. Now, over this part, the esophagus or the tube is actually relaxed, while behind it is actually contract. So it will contract, pushing the foot forward, contract, pushing the foot forward, contract, pushing the foot forward. Now, just to take note, this analogy is only applicable to the circular muscle, which is the internal part of the alimentary canal. The longitudinal muscle, which surrounds the circular muscle, is not being shown in this analogy. And lastly, there's no new digestion that takes place in the esophagus. And of course, any amylase attached onto the starch is still working its ass off, trying to break down starch into amylase. And to reinforce the idea of peristalsis, inside or throughout our alimentary canal, the circular muscle behind the half-digested food will contract, pushing the bolus forward. And the longitudinal muscle surrounding the circular muscle behind the food, they will relax because they are antagonistic to the circular muscle. The longitudinal muscle that is in front of the bolus will actually contract while the circular muscle will relax. This will shorten the passageway as well as widen the passageway ahead of the bolus, allowing it to be easily pushed through. And over here is a fanciful animation to show peristalsis. Circular muscle is in the center, C for center, C for circular, while the longitudinal muscle wrapping around the circular muscle will have an antagonistic effect. Now, because the video is getting too long, so I'm going to cut short the editing by ending it down here. In the next video, you will learn about digestion of food from stomach and beyond.